Welcome back. Tonight we'll drift into a story that stretches far beyond our ordinary days, far beyond our cities and screens, to a time when the world was very different. I invite you now to dim your lights, to settle under your blanket, to let the quiet of the evening wrap gently around you. And as you settle in, I wonder, where in the world are you listening from tonight? And what time is it there, in your own quiet corner? If this calm journey helps you unwind, you might tap like or even subscribe. But only if it feels right, only if it brings you peace. Close your eyes if you like. Listen as we step softly into an ancient earth nearly 4.3 million years ago, where creatures, both strange and familiar, wandered across a drying landscape. There were no roads, no houses, no bedtime snacks waiting on the counter, just the earth itself and the endless search for water. The night hums with the soft call of insects, the low whisper of wind through grass. We'll let that sound carry us as we begin. Let me take you back slowly, as though we're reclining into the softest chair. The year, or rather the span of years, was not measured by calendars or clocks. It was a time when the earth warmed and cooled in great rhythms, when water was both gift and mystery. Imagine the ground beneath us, cracked with dryness, scattered with grasses that swayed like tired dancers, and the scent of dust in the air. The creatures who lived here were always alert to water. Some of them walked on two legs, our distant ancestors, like Ardipithecus ramidus, about 4.3 million years ago in what is now Ethiopia. Their lives were not defined by smartphones or to-do lists, but by the daily puzzle: where to drink, how to keep alive in a world that did not always provide. I imagine them stepping carefully across the plains. Their feet press into the soil, leaving soft impressions that perhaps, just perhaps, might still exist, buried deep beneath layers of history. And what would they see? Perhaps a ribbon of green along a stream bed, where trees reach skyward and shade pooled like cool water itself. They would tilt their heads, listening to the hum of cicadas, maybe catching the faint croak of frogs, that telltale sound that somewhere nearby water lingered. Let's picture it together. You know that moment when you're thirsty at night, and you shuffle to the kitchen in the dark only to find that last glass of water waiting. Relief washes over you. For these creatures it was much the same, except their kitchen was the savannah, and their glass was a muddy pool ringed by reeds. Still, the satisfaction was there. I imagine the air, warm, carrying the smell of dry grasses. The sun has dipped low, leaving an orange glow on the horizon. Crickets are beginning their nighttime orchestra. The hominins lean down, their hands brushing cool mud as they lower their faces to drink. The rippling reflection of their own eyes shimmers for a moment before vanishing in circles of water. Waterholes were like taverns in medieval times, gathering places, not for ale or bread, but for life itself. Antelopes, birds, insects, even the occasional predator, all drawn to the same spot. Can you imagine the quiet tension? Like walking into a crowded cafe where every stranger glances your way, wondering if you belong. Some animals would sip nervously, ears twitching, eyes darting. Others would wait until the shadows deepened, until the dangerous ones had gone. And yet, this wasn't always a place of danger. Sometimes it was simply a place of stillness, a place where reeds rustled like soft whispers, where frogs plopped into water like pebbles tossed by invisible hands. The ancestors might have sat nearby, gnawing at roots or chewing fibrous fruits, their teeth working steadily. Imagine biting into a tough woody stem, nothing like the soft cookies we enjoy today. No sugar glaze, no chocolate chips, just the earthy taste of survival. Still, they adapted. They learned. Their hands, our hands, grew skillful, their eyes sharp, and always water guided them. The landscape itself was shifting. The world 4.3 million years ago was not as dry as it would later become, but already climates were in flux. Forests retreated, grasslands spread, rivers changed course. Each morning these early beings rose with the sun, scanning the land. Where were the trees? Where was the shade? Where might the herds go, leading the way to water? I like to think of it almost like a bedtime game. You know when you follow a trail of crumbs to find the hidden treat? They followed hoof prints, bird calls, even the faint smell of damp soil, step by step, clue by clue, until the sweet sound of trickling water rewarded their patience. And as we imagine them now, gathering at the water's edge, let us linger with them. Hear the soft lap of liquid. Feel the cool breeze rising from its surface. Notice how the stars overhead brighten, one by one, like lanterns lit by some patient hand. In that ancient night, water was not just survival, it was comfort, security, the closest thing to a lullaby. And as we leave that first waterhole, with its gentle ripples and quiet watchers, let your mind wander to what lies beyond. For in this world of drying lands, each pool, each spring, was a story waiting to unfold. The land stretched endlessly, pale and shimmering under the rising sun. From the ground up, heat began to drift like waves, blurring the horizon. Our ancestors, quiet and steady, moved along faint trails pressed into the earth by hooves, paws, and bare feet. They did not need maps, for the earth itself gave signs. Birdsong fluttered through the air, guiding them like soft arrows. Where birds dipped and circled, there might be water hidden ahead. Even the smallest wingbeat carried meaning. And so they walked, step by patient step. Imagine the ground, cracked, rough, a pattern of puzzle pieces. Each step pressed dust upward, leaving small clouds that followed behind, like shadows that refused to settle. The air smelled of dryness, of grass, brittle and broken. Yet here and there, a tree stood, leaves trembling faintly, whispering promises of shade. Within one such grove they found figs, not the sweet, soft kind we enjoy wrapped in pastry, but tougher, filled with seeds, chewy and fibrous. The taste was simple, the sweetness faint, but in those bites was both energy and water. Picture it. Chewing slowly, seeds crunching, flavour earthy, like a hint of honey trapped in bark. It was no feast, yet it carried life forward. Other creatures had found the grove as well. Monkeys chattered above, leaping branch to branch, tossing half-chewed fruit to the ground like careless children. Birds perched, waiting for insects stirred by movement. Even the smallest beetle clicked softly as it scurried across bark. The grove hummed with life, all gathered for the same reason. By midday, heat pressed harder, shadow shortened. The pool that lingered beneath the trees was shrinking, ringed by reeds leaning tiredly. Animals circled, waiting their turn. Antelopes dipping slender muzzles, warthogs snorting, cautious eyes flicking left and right. The air carried a hush, a truce born from thirst. For a few breaths, even predators stayed back. Our ancestors watched. They knew better than to rush forward. Waterholes were like crowded markets. You waited, you watched, you stepped carefully, and when the moment allowed, they too leaned down, lips brushing the surface. Mud clung to their hands, but coolness washed over tongues and throats, soothing the burning dryness. The relief was deep, like the first sip after hours under the sun. You know the way your shoulders drop, your breath softens, your whole body sighs. That was the gift water gave, but water never stayed. The sun pulled it upward, piece by piece, until only cracked mud remained. And so, when the evening cooled, they rose again. The air shifted, cooler now, carrying the smell of damp earth from somewhere unseen. They followed it like a trail. Across the plains, herds began their own march. Zebras striped like moving shadows, giraffes swinging their long necks with gentle rhythm, elephants plodding with patience. Each step, each low rumble reminded the watchers of where to go. The land itself offered clues, if only you listened. Night fell, stars brightening above like scattered fireflies. And then, at last, another stream revealed itself. Thin, winding but alive. The sound was soft, a trickle, a murmur like whispers in a quiet room. They cupped their hands, drank deeply, washed the dust from their faces, perhaps even splashed each other gently, because even in survival, joy found its way in. Around them, the plain exhaled. Crickets sang, frogs croaked near the banks. The stream reflected starlight, turning its dark surface into liquid silver. For a time, the search was over. Thirst eased, bellies calmed, bodies resting. and in that calm they slept, safe for now, safe until the next morning when the sun would rise again and the journey toward water would begin anew. The morning opened with a hush, as though the land itself held its breath. A thin mist drifted low across the grasses, cool against the ankles of those who walked slowly forward. Dew clung like tiny pearls, each droplet trembling in the soft light. Our ancestors bent, brushing lips to leaves, drinking in what the night had left behind. It was never enough, but it was something, like finding the last sip of tea at the bottom of a forgotten cup. The path ahead wound across a gentle rise scattered with stones that gleamed faintly where moisture still lingered from the night. Their bare feet pressed steady rhythms into the earth, prints that would vanish with the sun. Each step carried quiet intention, to find the next thread of water before thirst grew too sharp. The animals around them shared the same mission. Antelope moved in groups, ears twitching at the faintest sound. A pair of ostriches strode across the horizon, feathers lifting in the breeze. Even the smaller creatures, hares darting between tufts of grass, tortoises nosing along the ground, were part of this search, each following instincts written across millions of years. Imagine standing there, the air cool but heavy with expectation. In the distance, a line of green trees marked where water might run. Not a roaring river, but a stream, thin and fragile. Reaching it meant hope, missing it meant exhaustion, and so they walked, drawn forward. When they arrived, the stream was little more than a ribbon, winding through reeds that leaned together like old friends. The water was clear at first glance, though its flow was quiet, nearly shy. Birds fluttered at the edges, dipping their beaks quickly, scattering droplets into the air. Our ancestors knelt beside them, letting the water slip over their fingers. The taste was sharp, alive. Not sweet, not flavoured, but fresh in the way air feels after rain. They drank deeply, filling bellies, cooling throats. Relief washed over them like shade on a summer's day. It was the difference between pressing onward and faltering. Nearby, the streambed told its own story. Bones scattered lightly, bleached by sun. Remnants of antelope, of birds, perhaps even of their own kind. Each bone was a reminder. Water could give life, but it also invited danger. Crocodiles could linger in still pools, lions in the grass. To drink was always to risk, and yet the need was stronger. They stayed close, scooping water, chewing plants pulled from the bank, roots damp, earthy, tough but nourishing. Picture biting into one, like gnawing on a stringy carrot left too long in the ground, yet still carrying enough juice to soothe. As the sun climbed higher, the land shimmered. Shadows shrank, heat bent the air. The stream, so lively at dawn, began to look thinner, its edges drying into cracked mud. They knew not to linger. Too long in one place was dangerous. So as birds scattered once again, they followed. The day stretched on, a soft rhythm of walking, chewing, resting, watching. Sometimes they paused to crack open seeds with stones, sucking the faint oil that clung inside. Imagine it, the taste rich but bitter, sticking to the tongue like an old medicine, yet filling enough to carry them forward. When dusk returned, the air cooled. The land softened in colour, shadows grew long. Ahead, they found a small hollow where rain had gathered, hidden in rock. The pool was shallow, but still. They drank, they washed, they sat together in silence. Overhead, the stars brightened one by one, reflected faintly in the water's surface. For a moment, the pool looked like a window into the sky. Stars above, stars below. Our ancestors may not have had words for such beauty, but surely they felt it, the same way you feel the calm of looking into a quiet lake at night. And so they rested there, bellies heavy with water, limbs relaxing at last. The night hummed with crickets, the breeze stroked the grass, and the world, for a few hours, was kind. The night slipped away quietly, and the land awoke once more beneath the pale glow of dawn. The air was cooler now, a hush stretching across the wide plains, as though the earth itself was taking a long, slow breath. Our ancestors stirred with it, rising from their resting place beside the shallow rock pool. The water there had shrunk overnight, leaving only a thin film across the stone, but even that shimmered faintly, catching the first hints of light. They did not linger. The pool had given what it could, and now the trail forward beckoned. Imagine their steps. Bare feet pressing into soft dust, a rhythm steady and patient, each imprint soon erased by wind. Around them, the world seemed both vast and intimate. Endless horizons, yet every sound, the chirp of a bird, the rustle of grass, felt close enough to touch. The grasslands stretched wide, dotted with acacia trees, their branches reaching out like arms against the sky. Beneath them, the ground held faint coolness, and sometimes a hidden gift. Roots that drank deep from unseen water. With sharp stones they dug, pulling up those roots, chewing them slowly. The taste was bitter, fibrous, but the moisture inside was precious. Like sipping weak tea through paper, it offered just enough to ease the tongue. Animals moved with the same quiet urgency. Giraffes leaned down at rare pools, their long necks bending like curved bows. Zebras clustered, their stripes blending into living patterns as they shifted. Even the cautious gazelle lowered its head, ears twitching, eyes darting. Every drink was a gamble, every sip a victory. Sometimes danger lay hidden in stillness. Crocodiles, ancient and patient, lingered where streams slowed. Their eyes barely broke the surface, watching, waiting. Our ancestors learned to read the ripples, to listen for the silence that felt too heavy. To step back was not cowardice, it was wisdom. By midday the sun pressed hard again, bright and relentless. Shadows seemed to retreat, curling away beneath stones and brush. The land shimmered with heat as though the world were made of mirrors. In that haze, finding water meant survival, and so they followed signs invisible to us now. The flight of birds, the angle of withering leaves, the faint scent of damp carried on the wind. At last, they came to a hollow shaded by tall reeds. The water here was shallow, murky, but alive with movement. Frogs plopped into it with tiny splashes. Dragonflies skimmed its surface, wings glinting in the light. The air smelled faintly sweet, damp like soil after rain. They knelt, cupping hands, drinking carefully. Mud clung to their lips, but coolness washed the dryness from their throats. Nearby, they chewed reeds, tearing away tough outer layers to reach the watery pith inside. Imagine the crunch, like biting into celery that had been left too long in the sun, yet still holding a faint whisper of juice. It was not delicious, but it was relief. As the day cooled, the sky burned with colours, orange, crimson, violet. The hollow quieted. Animals stepped back into shadows. Even the insects slowed. Our ancestors lingered a while longer, resting, watching the reeds sway like slow dancers in the wind. When night came, the stars appeared again, spread wide across the sky. Their reflections quivered faintly in the water below, twin skies meeting for a moment. The ancestors huddled together, comforted by the steady hum of crickets, by the gentle lap of water against reeds. For a little while they were safe, and so they closed their eyes. The search paused until morning, their dreams carrying them gently onward to the next unknown pool, the next fleeting stream, the next chance at life in a drying world. The morning unfolded slowly, as though the earth was stretching itself awake. A thin veil of mist lingered low across the plain, curling around grasses and shrubs before the warmth of the sun began to chase it away. Our ancestors rose with the light, moving quietly, their bodies carrying the rhythm of another day's search. The ground beneath their feet was uneven, cracked in places, soft in others, a patchwork of soil that spoke of water once there, now gone. Each crack seemed like an old memory, a story of rivers that had flowed, pools that had glimmered. They read these marks like pages in a book, each detail guiding them forward. The scent of damp earth drifted faintly from the east, and so they turned their steps that way. Along the trail they paused at shrubs heavy with berries, not the sweet bursts we know today, but smaller, tougher, tart on the tongue. Still, they carried a spark of liquid, enough to leave a trace of coolness in the mouth. Imagine biting into one, Skin firm, flavour sharp, juice thin but welcome. A prehistoric version of sour candy, though without the fun wrapping. Birds fluttered ahead, their wings a soft drumbeat against the air. Their flight was not random, it drew a line, leading towards something unseen. Our ancestors followed. Step by step, patient as always, they trusted the signals written into the land. By midday, heat swelled again. The horizon shimmered as though painted in liquid. The air grew heavy, pressing down. Even the grasses sagged, their tips curling. It was then, at the edge of a shallow depression, that they found what they had been seeking. A pool, low and muddy, its edges trampled by hooves. The water was not clear, it smelled faintly of earth, of life compressed, but it was still water. Around it, animals gathered in cautious turns. A warthog shuffled forward, sipping noisily. Antelope lowered their delicate muzzles, ears flicking. Even the bold lioness stood apart, waiting, her patience stretched like a bowstring. Our ancestors approached carefully. They waited for the quiet moment when the crowd thinned and then knelt. Their hands dipped into the pool, raising liquid to their lips. It tasted of soil, of roots, of all the lives that had touched it, but still it cooled their throats, still it eased the dryness that burned. Nearby, reeds grew thick. They tore at them, stripping away layers until the moist pith revealed itself. The crunch was faint, the flavour bland, but the juice inside was clean. Like chewing on the ghost of water, it filled their mouths with small reliefs. Even here, danger lurked. The pool was shallow enough that crocodiles were unlikely, but the presence of predators was always near. The silence, the heavy stillness, those were warnings. Drinking was always a balance between risk and necessity, and so, after filling their bellies, they did not linger. As the day softened into evening, they moved onward. The sun sank low, painting the land in amber and violet. The pool behind them grew quiet again, reeds swaying like lullabies in the wind. Ahead, they sought higher ground where breezes were cooler, where the land stretched wide beneath the stars. There, on a rise dotted with stones, they rested. The air was cooler, carrying scents of grass and dust. Crickets sang. A night bird called softly in the distance. Above, the sky spread vast and endless, the stars like scattered embers. For a while they watched. For a while they listened. And then, slowly they lay back against the earth. Bellies calmed, bodies eased. The hum of the night wrapped around them like a blanket. Tomorrow the search would begin again. But tonight they had water, and tonight they had peace. The plain awoke once more beneath a sky brushed pale silver, the first hints of dawn creeping softly across the horizon. The air was cool, touched by a faint breeze that whispered through the grasses. Our ancestors rose quietly, stretching limbs, brushing dust from their skin. Their eyes turned instinctively toward the lowlands, where the land dipped gently and shadows hinted at moisture. The trail ahead was lined with scattered acacia trees, their thorns sharp, their branches twisted. Beneath them, the earth held secrets. Roots that dug deep into soil sometimes revealed moisture hidden from the surface. With stones they pried and pulled, chewing the thick fibres. The taste was harsh, woody, almost bitter, but each bite released faint streams of water that eased their thirst. Imagine chewing dry bark that suddenly releases a hidden drop of sweetness. It was that small surprise which made the work worthwhile. Around them, the savannah stirred. Herds began to move, antelope trotting lightly, the hooves tapping rhythms into the earth. A pair of giraffes tilted their long necks toward the treetops, plucking leaves, their tails swishing lazily against flies. Even small creatures like tortoises and hares crossed their path, each on its own quiet quest for survival. The ancestors followed the signs. Birds gathered low on the horizon, circling a patch of land where green seemed brighter. The air there smelled faintly damp, a rare gift in a world growing drier with each passing season. When they arrived, they found a shallow stream, its waters thin but steady, winding through grasses. The stream gurgled softly, a sound like whispered laughter. They knelt, hands dipping in, faces bending close. The water was cool, tasting of stone and earth. Relief spread quickly, shoulders loosening, breath slowing, the dry ache fading from their throats. It was the kind of relief you feel after a long walk when at last you sip something cold and fresh, a comfort beyond words. They lingered here, chewing reeds, cracking small seeds between stones to reach the oil within. The seeds were bitter, clinging to the tongue like old medicine, yet rich with energy. Imagine biting one open, the taste unpleasant but strong, a promise of strength tucked into something small. Yet even streams carried risk. The tall grasses nearby shivered with movement. Eyes glinted in the shade. Predators knew these places too well. Our ancestors drank quickly, alert, ears tuned to every rustle, every silence that seemed too heavy. Then, wisely, they moved on. As the sun climbed higher, the land grew bright and hot, the air heavy with warmth. Heat shimmered across the horizon, bending the world into waves of mirage. They found shade where they could, beneath trees, beside stones, but always their journey pressed forward. Each step was measured, patient, guided by the knowledge that somewhere ahead, another pool, another stream, another chance waited. By dusk, the sky burned with amber and deep violet. They reached a hollow where rainwater had gathered in rock. The pool was small, shallow, yet clear. Frogs croaked from its edge, insects skimmed its surface. The ancestors knelt once more, drinking slowly, savouring each mouthful as though it were treasure. Above, stars emerged, scattering across the wide sky. Their reflections quivered in the pool below, twin skies gazing back. The air cooled, carrying the sweet scent of damp soil. Around them, the night hummed, a chorus of crickets, the gentle rustle of reeds, the distant call of night birds. They lay close together, comforted by the nearness of water, by the stillness of night. Their eyes closed, dreams carried softly on the rhythm of survival. Tomorrow would bring thirst again. Tomorrow would bring another search. But tonight, in the company of stars and shallow water, there was rest. The morning sun rose slow and golden, washing the plains in light that spilled gently across the grass. Dew clung faintly to leaves, sparkling like tiny lanterns before vanishing into the warmth. Our ancestors moved forward once again, their footsteps steady, quiet, guided by instincts sharpened through countless journeys. The air was clear, carrying scents both sharp and earthy. Dry dust lingered, but beneath it lay the faint, sweet smell of moisture from somewhere ahead. The kind of scent that made their mouths water, that pulled them onward with promise. In the distance, they spotted a line of green trees clustered along a shallow valley. Green, in this landscape, meant hope. With patience they descended. The earth grew softer underfoot, the grasses taller. And then, hidden between reeds, they found it. A pond, still and calm, as though it had been waiting for them all along. Animals had gathered before them. Antelopes bent their slender necks, ripples circling out where their muzzles touched the surface. Birds darted in and out, wings flashing. Even turtles sat half buried in mud, eyes glinting with slow contentment. Our ancestors knelt at the edge, letting their hands sink into the coolness. They lifted water to their lips. It tasted faintly of plants, of earth, of life itself. Each sip eased the dryness. Each swallow spread relief, loosening the tension that had built over long hours of walking. The pond was more than water. It was comfort, like a cool breeze through an open window at the end of a sweltering day. Nearby, reeds swayed gently. They stripped them open, chewing the soft centers. The flavor was bland, almost grassy, but filled their mouths with thin liquid that helped even more. Imagine chewing celery, but weaker, more delicate. It wasn't a feast, but in that moment, it was enough. They rested there, though carefully. The stillness of the pond was soothing, but stillness could also mean danger. A crocodile could lie beneath the surface, unmoving until the final instant. They stayed alert, their ears tuned to every splash, every unnatural silence. As the sun climbed, the pond began to shrink under its heat, edges pulling back, mud thickening. And so, when their thirst had eased, they moved onward. The journey was never done, not in a land that grew drier with each passing season. Along their path they found fruits, Small, fibrous, tart on the tongue. The taste was sharp, like biting into an unripe plum, yet juicy enough to leave a cool trace in the mouth. Their hands worked steadily, pulling more, chewing seeds, spitting skins. Every mouthful was survival, a little gift tucked inside the struggle. By evening, the sky burned with orange, fading into deep violet. Shadows stretched across the plains, long and soft. The air cooled, and with it came the smell of damp soil from somewhere unseen. They followed, patient, until they reached another stream, its waters slipping gently over stone. They knelt once more, hands dipping, lips brushing coolness. The sound of the stream was soft, steady, like a lullaby hummed by the earth itself. Around them, crickets began their chorus. Frogs answered in low croaks, and the stars above brightened one by one. There, beside flowing water, they rested. Their bellies were calmer, their bodies eased. Tomorrow would bring another search, another day of sun and dust. But tonight they had the comfort of water's song carrying them into dreams. The night had passed gently, and dawn unfolded like a slow breath across the horizon. Pale light stretched outward, brushing the tips of grasses with silver, then gold. Our ancestors stirred, rising from their rest near the murmuring stream. Their eyes turned instinctively toward the wide plain, their ears catching the faint calls of birds already in flight. The world around them was alive yet cautious. Herds moved carefully, hooves pressing soft marks into the soil still damp with night's coolness. A breeze swept across the land carrying hints of dust, of grass, and faintly, just faintly, the promise of moisture. They began walking, following the path that countless feet before them had worn. The trail dipped gently into a low valley, where rocks curved like cupped hands holding secrets. At the bottom, water had gathered, a shallow basin ringed by reeds and grasses, its surface still and smooth. Animals were already there. Zebras, their stripes blurring in the morning haze, stood shoulder to shoulder as they bent to drink. Birds perched at the edges, dipping their beaks quickly, scattering droplets into air. Even the smaller creatures, a jackal, cautious and lean, a tortoise nosing along the mud, had come to share in the morning's gift. Our ancestors approached with care. They waited until the moment was right, until the crowd shifted, until danger seemed less. Then they knelt at the edge, letting the cool surface ripple beneath their fingers. The taste was earthy, faintly bitter, but refreshing enough to soothe the fire of thirst. Each swallow softened the body as though life itself was pouring back in. Nearby, they tugged at roots, pulling them from softened soil. The fibers were tough, woody, but when split, small trickles of liquid seeped out. Imagine chewing something like a dry carrot, only to find the faintest sweetness inside, just enough to make you chew a little longer, to keep going. As the sun climbed higher, heat began to gather again, shimmering across the land. The pond shrank, its edges pulling back into mud. Frogs croaked low from its corners. Dragonflies darted over its surface, wings catching the light like fragments of glass. The air grew heavier, pressing down with brightness. Knowing the water would not last, they moved onward. Their eyes scanned the land, searching for other signs. Greener grasses, birds circling in clusters, the faint coolness of breezes flowing from shaded hollows. Step by step, they trusted the earth to guide them. By late afternoon, their patience was rewarded. They came upon a hidden spring, tucked beneath a slope where stone cracked open the earth. Water slipped quietly from the rock, gathering in a narrow pool before disappearing again into the soil. The sound was soft, a trickle like whispered secrets. They drank deeply. This water was clearer, fresher, cooler than the pond. Its taste lingered sweetly on the tongue, crisp and alive. They cupped hands again and again, splashing faces, letting it wash dust from skin. Relief spread through them, heavy and deep, the kind of comfort that makes even silence feel warm. As evening settled, they stayed near the spring. They chewed fruits gathered nearby, small, tart but juicy, leaving their lips sticky with sweetness. Imagine biting into something like a wild grape, sour but refreshing, surprising in its relief. It was a gift, and they savoured it slowly. The sky burned orange, then violet, then deepened into dark. Stars emerged, scattering across the heavens like seeds tossed from an unseen hand. Their light glimmered in the spring below, twin skies touching for a moment. Our ancestors huddled close, their bellies calmer, their bodies soothed. Around them, the night hummed. Crickets, frogs, the faint sigh of wind. The spring murmured softly, its steady trickle like a lullaby. And so they drifted, eyelids closing, carried gently into dreams. The day began with a hush, the horizon stretching wide beneath a sky just waking from darkness. The air was cool, touched with a faint dampness that clung to the grasses. Our ancestors rose quietly, brushing sleep from their eyes, their bodies moving with the ease of habit. Each morning began the same way, listening, watching, sensing where water might call them next. The plain was scattered with tracks pressed into soft soil, hoof prints, paw prints, claw marks, all pointing toward the same direction. To follow them was to follow the flow of life itself, and so they did, stepping into the footprints of antelope and zebra, trusting that where many had gone, water was not far behind. The path was gentle at first, winding through grasses that rustled softly in the morning wind. Birds lifted from the stems, wings flashing, their calls sharp against the stillness. Each note was a clue, guiding ears tuned by necessity. Where birds gathered, where they dipped suddenly toward the ground, water often lingered. By midday the sun pressed harder. Shadows shrank and the air grew heavy with heat. Their throats tightened, dry and sore. Yet ahead, the land dipped into a shallow basin, its edges green with reeds. And there it was, a pool, not wide, not deep, but alive. Its surface shimmered with light, dragonflies skimming across it like shards of glass. Animals had gathered in quiet turns. Antelope dipped their slender faces, ripples spreading outward. A small herd of elephants approached slowly, their trunks swinging, scooping, lifting water to their mouths. Even the smaller creatures, hares, birds, lizards, took their share. It was a gathering without invitation, bound by the shared truth of thirst. Our ancestors waited. Patience was survival. They watched, they listened, they studied the movements of others, and when the moment allowed, they stepped forward, kneeling at the water's edge. Their hands dipped in, bringing coolness to lips cracked from sun. The taste was earthy, tinged with mud, but it soothed. With each swallow, their bodies loosened, their breathing eased, the tightness in their chest unwound. Around the pond, they pulled at reeds, stripping away layers to chew the watery cores. The crunch was soft, the flavour faint, but each mouthful gave comfort. Like celery's ghost, faint but refreshing, it left a whisper of coolness behind. They stayed until the pool began to shrink beneath the afternoon sun. Edges pulled inward, mud thickened, and the animals dispersed. With bellies eased and skins dampened, they moved on, stepping back into the wide plain. The evening brought softer air, touched with the scent of soil. Clouds gathered low, their bellies heavy with rain, though the drops did not fall. Our ancestors pressed forward, guided by the faint gurgle of water unseen. And then, in a shallow gully, they found it. A stream, thin and winding, slipping gently over smooth stones. They knelt again, cupping hands, splashing faces. The water was crisp, cool, singing softly as it ran. Its sound was steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat in the earth. They drank deeply, their bodies absorbing the relief. Then they sat close together, chewing fruits gathered along the banks, small, tart, juicy enough to stain their lips faintly. As night fell, the stream became a ribbon of silver, reflecting stars that spilled across the sky. The air cooled, carrying the hum of crickets, the croak of frogs, the distant call of night birds. They lay back against the earth, eyes turned upward, the world above mirrored in the world below. For a little while, thirst was forgotten. For a little while, the search was over. The night wrapped around them like a blanket, and they drifted softly into dreams. The first light of dawn crept across the plain, painting the horizon in pale orange and soft pink. The air was cool for a brief moment, carrying a freshness that vanished quickly once the sun began to climb. Our ancestors stirred quietly, rising from their resting place near the stream that had lulled them through the night. Their eyes turned outward, scanning the wide land once more. The ground stretched in rippling waves of grass, golden and brittle, bending gently in the breeze. Far ahead, birds dipped and circled, their calls sharp against the silence. It was a signal, faint but certain. Water lay in that direction. Step by step, they began their slow walk toward the promise. The land was never simple. Cracks split the earth where old pools had dried, their beds now hard and white, as though the earth itself carried scars of thirst. Our ancestors paused at one such hollow, its edges littered with bones bleached by sun, a reminder that water both gave and took life. They moved on, careful, steady, unwilling to linger where nothing remained. By midday, heat pressed heavy against them. The horizon shimmered, wavering as though wrapped in glass. Even the grasses seemed to wilt, their tips curled, their colours fading. Their throats ached, each swallow dry, their bodies urging them forward. And then, finally, a glimmer. A pond lay ahead, shallow but alive, its surface rippling faintly where animals gathered. Herds pressed close. Zebras dipped muzzles, antelope lifted heads nervously, ears flicking at every sound. A pair of elephants moved with steady grace, scooping water with trunks, spraying it across their backs in great arcs of silver. Birds perched at the edges, wings flashing as they darted in and out. Our ancestors approached with patience. They waited for the restless rhythm of animals to shift, then knelt at the bank. Their hands sank into the mud, scooping cool water upward. It tasted faintly bitter, touched with reeds, but each sip washed away dryness. Relief spread quickly, breathing slowed, shoulders eased, eyes softened. They pulled at nearby reeds, chewing slowly through fibrous stalks. The watery cores released faint juice, bland but soothing. Imagine biting into celery left long in the sun. Less flavour, less crunch, yet still carrying the whisper of moisture. It was not joy, but it was survival. The pond gave what it could, but already the sun pulled at it, shrinking its edges, warming its surface. Crocodiles could not hide here. It was too shallow, but the scent of predators lingered in the grasses. Our ancestors drank what they needed, then moved on, guided by instinct and patience. The afternoon stretched across the land like a sheet of fire. Shadows shrank, the air hummed with insects. Still they walked, following the faint smell of dampness carried on the wind. Ahead, a line of trees leaned into the sky, their roots clutching hidden streams. There, at last, a small river wound through the valley, its waters glimmering under sun. The sound of it was music, gentle, steady, endless. They knelt, cupped hands, splashed faces. The water was cool, sweeter than ponds, flowing cleanly over stone. Its taste lingered on their tongues, crisp and refreshing. Their bellies filled, their bodies softened with comfort. They gathered fruits nearby, chewing the tart flesh, sticky juice running down their hands. Imagine biting into something like a wild grape. Sharp at first, then faintly sweet, leaving lips tingling. They ate slowly, savouring what nature had offered. As dusk approached, the river's surface mirrored the sky, turning orange, then violet, then deep indigo. Frogs croaked from the banks, insects hummed in the reeds, and birds settled into silence. Our ancestors rested close to the flowing water, its murmur a lullaby as stars brightened above. The night wrapped around them gently, for now thirst was eased, and the endless search paused. In the quiet company of river and sky, they drifted into sleep, carried softly by the sound of moving water. The morning light spilled softly across the valley, turning the river into a ribbon of silver that shimmered as it wound through the land. Mist hovered low above the water, lifting slowly as the sun climbed, like a blanket being drawn away. Our ancestors stirred from their resting place on the banks, their bodies heavy with the calm that comes after thirst has been eased. They rose quietly, watching the river flow. It whispered over stones, carrying with it the memory of distant rains that might not touch this plain for weeks. Streams like this were rare treasures. To follow them meant both comfort and risk. Comfort, for the water was steady, and risk, because every creature knew where to gather. The path followed the river's edge for a time, winding through grasses that grew taller and greener here than on the open plain. Birds darted in and out of the reeds, their wings catching the light. A fish leapt briefly, its scales flashing like polished stone before vanishing again into the current. Even crocodiles drifted near the banks, their eyes just above the surface, patient and still. Our ancestors drank when they could, leaning down carefully, watching the shadows for movement. The water was clean, cool, its taste fresh against their tongues. Each sip lingered, soothing their throats, filling their bellies with quiet relief. Along the banks they found fruits that had fallen from trees, small, fibrous, not overly sweet, but juicy enough to bring smiles in their own way. Imagine biting into a plum too sour to eat easily, yet bursting with water all the same. Lips puckered, teeth ground through the flesh, and still they chewed because each bite carried what the body needed. They rested beneath the shade of a wide fig tree, its branches spreading above like protective arms. The air here smelled of damp earth, sweetened faintly by the fruits. Monkeys moved among the branches, chattering, dropping half-chewed figs to the ground. Our ancestors collected what they could, grateful for scraps as much as for whole fruits. By midday the sun pressed heavily. Heat shimmered above the river, and the ground away from its banks cracked and whitened. The river narrowed, split into smaller streams, some fading into mud, others slipping into rocky channels. Still they followed, step by patient step, guided by sound and sight. The afternoon brought them to a shallow pool where the river had paused. Reeds ringed it, their stalks swaying gently. Frogs clung to the edges, their throats swelling with low croaks. Dragonflies hovered above, their wings glittering in the sun. The pool was alive with sound and movement, though its water was still. Our ancestors drank here too, kneeling carefully. The taste was heavier, touched with soil, but still cool enough to ease their thirst. They chewed reeds pulled from the bank, splitting the stalks to reach the watery hearts. The crunch was soft, the flavour bland, but moisture flowed across their tongues like quiet threads of comfort. Evening approached with slow grace. The sky burned with orange and violet, the river catching each colour and carrying it onward. The animals around them quieted, zebras stepping back from the water, antelope gathering in the grasses, birds folding wings for the night. Our ancestors chose a high patch of ground above the river to rest. The air cooled, carrying the scent of water and soil upward. Crickets began their song, steady and soft, while frogs answered below. The river whispered in the dark, a lullaby older than memory. Above, the stars shone bright, mirrored faintly in the ripples below. They lay close together, bellies eased, eyes heavy, comforted by the sound of water moving endlessly on. Tomorrow the search would continue, but tonight the river's voice carried them gently into dreams. The river had been kind, but the morning brought change. As the sun lifted, shadows stretched long, and the river's steady song began to fade into distance. The land rose gently, pulling them away from the flowing water. Our ancestors followed the paths of animals, faint trails pressed into dust, each step carrying the quiet rhythm of survival. The ground was drier here, grasses shorter, brittle underfoot. The air was sharper, carrying the smell of dust and the faint tang of stone warmed by the sun. They walked in silence, ears tuned to every rustle, every call of birds above. Even silence was a guide. Too still meant danger, but scattered sounds meant life nearby, and life often meant water. By mid-morning they reached a hollow where an old pond had once lived. Its floor was cracked, patterned like broken pottery, white with salt and minerals. Bones lay scattered across its edge. Antelopes, birds, perhaps even ancestors long gone. The dry pond told its own story. Water had been here, water had gone, and life had ended with it. They lingered only briefly, then pressed forward. Hunger stirred, but thirst pressed sharper. They pulled roots from the edges of shrubs, chewing their fibrous lengths. The flavour was woody, bitter, like biting into bark. Yet within the fibres, faint streams of liquid seeped out, enough to cool the tongue. It was not pleasure, but it was survival. The afternoon grew heavy. Heat shimmered across the horizon, bending the air into wavering patterns. Even the animals moved slower. Zebras walked with lowered heads, antelope paused more often in the shade. Dust clung to the air, scratching the throat with each breath. Then, in the distance, a cluster of trees stood taller, greener, gathered around a narrow valley. They turned their steps that way, hope stirring quietly. The closer they drew, the more the air shifted, cooler, softer, carrying the faint smell of dampness. And then, at the valley's base, water revealed itself. A spring, small but clear, seeping from the ground into a shallow pool. The spring was alive with sound. Frogs croaked from its edges, insects buzzed and skimmed the surface, birds swooped in quick bursts of colour. The water was fresh, clean, sweeter than the ponds and streams of before. Our ancestors knelt eagerly, cupping hands, drinking deeply. Each swallow washed the dust away, cooling throats, calming bodies. Relief spread through them like shade on the hottest day. They stayed near the spring, chewing leaves from nearby trees, tart and green. Fruits hung above, small and sour, but juicy enough to leave sticky traces on lips. Imagine biting into something like an unripe pear, sharp, puckering, but filled with water. They ate slowly, savouring what the land had offered. As the sun lowered, the valley glowed in warm gold. Shadows stretched across the pool, and animals gathered in calm turns. Zebras bent their striped necks, elephants splashed, antelope stood knee-deep in the shallows. Even predators came quietly, a lioness crouching to drink, her reflection broken by ripples. For a time, balance held, every creature bound together by the need to sip from the same gift. When night arrived, stars spilled across the sky, mirrored in the spring surface. The air cooled, soft breezes rustling the reeds. Crickets hummed their steady chorus. Frogs answered in deep notes, and the spring whispered with its trickle. Our ancestors lay close, bodies eased by water, stomachs filled with tart fruits and roots, their eyes closed, guided into rest by the quiet song of the valley. For now, the search had paused. For now, the drying world had given them peace. The sun rose behind a pale haze, its light soft at first, then sharper as it climbed. The spring in the valley had been generous, but morning meant moving onward. Our ancestors stirred, brushing sleep from their eyes, their ears catching the faint chatter of birds above. The ground beneath them was cool still, holding the memory of night. Soon it would heat again, and with it the thirst would return. They followed a narrow path away from the valley, their bare feet pressing into soil that shifted from soft to hard, from green patches to dust. The air smelled faintly sweet, touched with the scent of damp earth carried from the spring. But each step took them farther, and the smell faded, replaced again by dryness. The plain opened wide before them. Grasses rippled like waves, brittle and golden, swaying with the wind. Far ahead, herds moved slowly, antelope in loose clusters, zebras with their stripes blending in motion, elephants swaying side to side with steady patience. All were drawn toward the same unseen goal. To follow them was to follow water. By midday, heat pressed heavily, shimmering against the horizon. Shadows shrank until they seemed to vanish beneath stones and brush. The ground cracked beneath their feet, splitting into patterns like puzzles left unfinished. Their throats tightened, their breaths grew heavier. Still they pressed forward, eyes searching, ears listening for the faintest sound of running water. At last, the silence broke with the low hum of insects, the croak of frogs. Ahead lay a pond, its surface ringed with reeds and grasses, alive with movement. Dragonflies darted above, their wings flashing like glass in sunlight. Birds gathered along the edges, dipping quickly before lifting again. Even turtles clung to the mud, their shells glistening faintly. Our ancestors approached slowly, waiting for their turn. They knew the pond belonged to all, predator and prey alike. Lions might come, hyenas might linger. Patience was the price of safety. When the moment felt still, they knelt, dipping hands, drinking. The water was warm from the sun, tinged with mud, but it flowed cool across their tongues, easing the burn of thirst. Nearby, they stripped reeds, chewing through tough fibres to reach watery cores. The taste was faint, bland, but moisture seeped slowly, spreading across their mouths. It was like chewing shadows of food, yet even shadows could bring relief in this world. The afternoon wore on. The sun dragged across the sky, heavy and bright. The pond shrank, its edges pulling back, mud darkening where water had been. Frogs croaked louder, insects hummed faster, as if they too felt the urgency of vanishing water. Our ancestors left before the pond dried further, their bellies filled enough to carry them onward. They followed the herds again, stepping where hooves had pressed paths into soil. Their ears caught the faint rush of wind through trees ahead, and then, at dusk, the sound of water once more. A narrow river curved through the plain, its banks lined with tall grasses. The water was clearer, cooler, slipping over stones with a soft voice. They drank eagerly, filling their bellies, splashing faces, washing dust from skin. Relief spread again, deep and quiet. They gathered fruits from bushes along the bank, tart and juicy, staining their lips with faint sweetness. Imagine biting into a berry just sharp enough to make you wince, but still refreshing enough to make you smile. They ate slowly, savouring each bite. As night fell, the river reflected the sky. Stars shimmered above and below, twin heavens stretching endless. The air cooled, carrying the hum of crickets, the low croak of frogs. The river sang softly in the dark, its rhythm steady, soothing. Our ancestors rested close, bellies eased, bodies calmed. The search had paused again. Wrapped in night and water's song, they drifted into dreams, ready for another day when the sun returned. The day began with a golden haze, the horizon blurred where the rising sun met the land. The grasses whispered with the faintest breeze, their brittle stalks brushing softly against each other, like the sound of paper turning. Our ancestors rose quietly, their eyes drawn instinctively to the movement of animals ahead. Herds always knew the paths, and the paths always led sooner or later to water. They followed slowly, conserving strength, their feet pressing prints into dust that scattered in little puffs with each step. The air was dry, sharp against the throat, but the smell of dampness lingered faintly in the distance, tugging them onward. By mid-morning, the herds converged at a low basin ringed with green reeds. A pool lay at its centre, wide and shallow, its surface stirred by animals crowding in cautious turns. Zebras bent their striped necks, antelope flicked their ears nervously, warthogs grunted as they waded knee-deep. The air was filled with the chorus of survival, the buzz of insects, the croak of frogs. The quiet lap of water disturbed again and again. Our ancestors lingered on the edges, watching. To rush forward was to invite danger, for predators also came here. And indeed, in the shade of tall grass, the faint outline of a lioness lay hidden, her eyes fixed on the gathering. Patience was safety. They waited until the moment felt right, until the lioness moved away, seeking easier prey. Then they knelt at the water's edge. They drank deeply, cupping hands, letting cool liquid slip across lips dry from dust. The taste was muddy, warm from the sun, but still it was life. Each swallow soothed, spread calm through weary bodies. They filled themselves slowly, then leaned back, wiping mud from their skin. Nearby, they stripped reeds and chewed the soft centres. The flavour was faint, almost nothing, but the watery pith eased their mouths further. Imagine chewing on old celery, pale and stringy, but finding just enough moisture to carry you through. It was humble, but it was relief. The pool shrank as the sun climbed, its edges pulling inward. Mud darkened, reeds sagged. Knowing the water would not last, they left while the herd still lingered. The plain stretched again before them, shimmering under the weight of heat. The afternoon passed with slow steps, each one heavy beneath the sun. Thirst stirred again, though not as sharp. They chewed roots pulled from the earth, sucking the faint trickles hidden inside. The taste was woody, bitter, but necessity softened its harshness. By evening the land sloped gently downward. The scent of damp soil grew stronger, carried by the cool wind of dusk. And then, at the bottom of the slope, a river revealed itself. Broad, slow-moving, its surface gleaming with the last colours of sunset. The river sang in a low murmur, water slipping over stones, curling around bends. Animals gathered here too, though less crowded than at the morning's pool. Elephants sprayed water across their backs, calves rolling in the shallows. Birds darted low, dipping quickly before lifting again. The air was alive, filled with the hum of creatures at peace. Our ancestors knelt, drinking deeply once more. The water here was cooler, fresher, sweeter. Each sip lingered on the tongue, crisp and bright, washing away the day's dust. They splashed their faces, rubbed the coolness across their arms, and let out low sounds of relief. Soft, wordless, but filled with gratitude. They gathered fruits from bushes along the banks, tart and sticky, juice running down their chins. Imagine biting into something sour like a wild lemon, but softened by sweetness. Their lips puckered, then softened into quiet satisfaction. They chewed slowly, savouring each piece. Night spread gently. The river turned dark, reflecting stars that emerged above. Crickets sang in endless rhythm. Frogs answered in deep tones, and the wind carried the scent of water through the grasses. Our ancestors rested near the banks, the murmur of the river a lullaby. Their bellies were eased, their thirst softened, their bodies calmed. Wrapped in the sound of moving water and the cool breath of night, they drifted softly into sleep. The morning opened with a quiet brightness. The sky brushed with pale gold, the air still cool enough to carry ease. The river that had comforted them through the night lay behind, its song fading into memory. Ahead, the plain stretched wide once more, a canvas of grasses swaying under the gentle breath of wind. Our ancestors rose slowly, their bodies strengthened by rest, their minds tuned again to the day's familiar search. They moved in silence at first, following faint paths pressed into the soil by countless hooves. The ground here was dry, cracked in places, its surface patterned like broken clay. Yet life had left its signs. Droppings of antelope, faint prints of zebras, even the drag marks of a tortoise crossing in the night, all pointed forward toward water yet unseen. The air carried a sharp smell of dust, but beneath it lingered the faint sweetness of dampness. They tasted it in their throats, felt it in the wind brushing across their faces. Patience was their greatest tool. Step by steady step, they let the land lead them. By late morning, they found a shallow depression ringed with reeds. At its centre lay a pond, small and warm, its edges soft with mud. Dragonflies darted across its surface, frogs croaked from its corners, and birds flitted from stalk to stalk, their wings catching the sun. Animals gathered in cautious order. Zebras bent their heads, tails swishing against flies. Warthogs shuffled forward noisily, splashing into the shallows. Antelope dipped muzzles, their ears twitching at every sound. Even a jackal lingered at the edge, stealing quick sips before darting back. Our ancestors waited for their moment, then approached. They knelt, cupping hands, lifting water that smelled faintly of mud but cooled their tongues all the same. Each sip soothed, spreading quiet relief through their bodies. They chewed reeds as well, stripping the outer layers to reach watery cores. The taste was bland, the crunch soft, but every fibre carried thin threads of moisture. The pull was enough for the morning, but not enough for long. By midday, the sun pressed down, pulling water into the air. Edges shrank, mud thickened, and frogs croaked louder as their world grew smaller. Knowing the pond would fade, our ancestors moved onward. The afternoon tested them. Heat shimmered across the plain, bending the horizon into wavering patterns. Dust clung to their throats, tightening with each breath. They chewed roots pulled from dry soil, bitter and woody, yet within them faint streams of liquid seeped out. Like chewing bark that reluctantly gave up a drop of sweetness, it was harsh but necessary. Their steps carried them toward the faint sound of movement, a low murmur hidden beneath the hum of insects. As they drew closer, the scent of damp soil grew stronger, cool against the heat. And then, at the base of a rocky slope, water revealed itself. A stream trickling from stone, narrow but steady. The sound was gentle, a quiet rhythm of drops and ripples. They knelt eagerly, cupping hands, splashing faces. The water was cool, crisp, sweet compared to the pond. It lingered on their tongues, refreshing, as though drawn from the sky itself. They drank deeply, filled their bellies, and let out soft sighs of comfort. Nearby, they found fruits hanging low, small and sour but juicy. Their lips puckered at the first bite, the taste sharp like biting into a wild lemon, yet it flooded their mouths with moisture. They chewed slowly, juice dripping down their chins, savouring what the land had offered. As evening settled, the sky burned in orange and violet, the stream catching each colour in its surface. Animals gathered quietly, not in crowded tension but in gentle rhythm. Zebras drinking side by side, birds dipping wings, insects humming above. Our ancestors sat close together, bellies calmed, eyes softened. The stream sang softly beside them, its steady trickle a lullaby. Above, stars emerged, mirrored faintly in the water below. The air cooled, carrying the scent of stone and soil. They lay back against the earth, comforted by the sounds of water and night. The day's thirst had been answered. Wrapped in silence, song and starlight, they drifted once more into dreams. The sun lifted slowly, its first light brushing the grasses with silver before turning them to gold. The stream that had sung to them through the night was behind now, its voice fading into memory. Ahead, the plain stretched wide, dry and pale beneath the sky. Our ancestors began their slow walk once more, their footsteps steady, their eyes scanning for signs of water hidden somewhere in the endless land. The ground cracked beneath them, white lines etched across the earth like old scars. Here and there, tufts of grass bent low, brittle and tired. Yet in the air lingered the faint sweetness of damp soil, carried on a wind that promised more than the land revealed. They followed the paths of animals, hoofprints pressed into dust, trails that led forward. The tracks were many, layered upon each other, as though every creature had walked this way with the same quiet urgency. To follow them was to trust the wisdom of herds, for animals too knew where the water still lived. By mid-morning they reached a hollow where an old pond had been. Its edges were marked with reeds, dry and brittle now, and the floor was cracked into white shards. Bones lay scattered across it, pale and silent. Antelope, birds, even predators, all had come here once, but no longer. The pond was only memory. Our ancestors paused, then turned away. The heat sharpened as the sun climbed higher. Shadows shrank, the air thickened. Thirst pressed harder with each step, a dry weight in their throats. They pulled roots from shrubs, chewing them slowly. The taste was bitter, woody, but faint threads of liquid seeped out, enough to keep them moving. The land grew harsher as midday stretched. Dust rose with every step, clinging to their skin. The horizon wavered with mirage, water painted where none existed. Yet their patience did not falter. They listened, they watched, they trusted the land. And then, as the afternoon softened, a sign appeared. Birds circling low, reeds bending green in the distance. They came upon a small spring hidden at the base of a slope. Water slipped from stone, pooling in a shallow basin before sinking back into the earth. It was quiet here, shaded by trees whose roots drank deep. The air smelled sweet, damp, cool against the heat of day. They knelt eagerly. The water was cool, fresh, sweet on the tongue. Each sip lingered, soothing their throats, calming their bellies. They splashed faces, rubbed dust from their arms, letting relief wash over them. Around them, animals gathered as well, zebras bending their heads, a warthog wading knee-deep, birds darting quick as shadows. Nearby, fruits hung low, tart and juicy. They plucked them, biting into sharp flesh that puckered lips. But the juice spilled freely, sweet and sour at once. Imagine biting into a wild berry that shocks the tongue but quenches thirst. It was both challenge and gift. They ate slowly, savouring what little the land had offered. Evening came softly, the sky painted in orange, then violet, then deepening into indigo. The spring glimmered with each colour, its surface mirroring the sky until stars appeared above and below. The air cooled, carrying the hum of insects and the soft croak of frogs hidden among reeds. Our ancestors sat close, bellies eased, bodies soothed. The spring whispered quietly, steady as a heartbeat. Wrapped in its song, they lay down against the earth, their eyes heavy. Thirst had been answered, hunger softened, and the night stretched calm and safe. For a little while the world was gentle, and in that gentleness they drifted into dreams. The morning began with a thin veil of mist across the plain, rising slowly as the sun crept higher. The spring behind them still whispered faintly, its memory carried in the coolness of their skin, but the journey pressed onward. Our ancestors rose quietly, moving with the rhythm of the land, their eyes tuned to signs, their ears listening for the hidden language of survival. The ground ahead sloped gently upward. Rocks jutted from the soil, their surfaces darkened with traces of moisture long gone. Cracks spread across the earth like a net, white and sharp, reminders of ponds that once lived here. Each hollow seemed to sigh with absence, as though the world itself remembered where water had been. They chewed roots pulled from shrubs as they walked, bitter, fibrous, dry at first, yet within them faint threads of liquid seeped. Each chew was like pulling a whisper from silence, small, but enough to quiet the burn of thirst for another few steps. Herds moved nearby, antelope shifted in waves, the hooves pressing soft rhythms into the soil. Zebras followed, stripes blending in motion until they looked like rippling shadows. Even elephants trudged along, ears flapping, their steps deliberate. All moved in the same direction, bound by the same need. To follow them was to follow the map written into the land itself. By midday the sun weighed heavily. The horizon shimmered, bent with heat, and the air tasted of dust. Thirst deepened, pressing sharp against their throats. Yet patience kept them steady. They trusted the signs, and soon enough they saw it. Reeds bending green in the distance, their tops swaying gently. At the heart of those reeds lay a pond, shallow but alive. Its edges were soft with mud, its surface alive with insects skimming in quick flashes of light. Frogs croaked from corners, dragonflies hovered above, and birds dipped low, their wings brushing ripples into the water. Our ancestors approached carefully, waiting until the herds had shifted, until danger seemed far. Then they knelt at the edge. The water was warm, muddy, touched with the taste of plants, but it eased their throats. Each swallow softened the dryness. Each breath after grew calmer. They stripped reeds too, chewing through stalks to reach watery cores. The flavour was faint, bland, but the liquid inside cooled their mouths. Imagine chewing a stalk of celery drained of its crispness, leaving only ghostly moisture. Yet in that moment, even a ghost was precious. The pond shrank under the sun as hours passed. Its edges curled inward, its surface lowering, frogs retreating deeper into mud. Knowing it would not last, they moved on while the light still lingered. The afternoon stretched long. Heat shimmered, insects hummed, dust clung. They followed herds again, their eyes drawn to distant shadows of trees. By dusk, the land dipped into a narrow channel where water slipped in a thin stream winding gently between rocks. The stream was cool, its sound steady like a soft hum. They knelt eagerly, splashing faces, drinking deeply. The taste was crisp, sweet, far cleaner than the pond. Relief filled them, heavy and quiet, spreading through bodies tired from the day. They chewed fruits from nearby bushes, tart and juicy, lips stained faintly with their colour. Night came with a slow hush. The sky turned violet, then indigo, stars appearing one by one until the heavens glowed. The stream reflected them faintly, turning its surface into a moving sky. Crickets sang, frogs croaked, and the night wrapped itself around the land like a blanket. Our ancestors lay close, bellies eased, skin cooled, eyes soft. The stream whispered in the dark, a lullaby as steady as the stars. With thirst calmed and hunger softened, they drifted gently into dreams. The day began with the faintest chill, the kind that lingers only for a moment before the sun claims the land. Mist clung low in the grasses, silver beads of dew trembling at the tips. Our ancestors stirred, rising from their rest near the stream, their eyes turned forward, scanning the plain that stretched like a great endless page waiting to be written upon. The path ahead was quiet, but not empty. Prints pressed into soil told the story of others who had passed. The deep round marks of elephants, the lighter steps of antelope, the thin scratches of birds, all pointed in the same direction. To follow was to trust. To trust was to survive. As they walked, the ground grew firmer, stones scattered across the surface. Their feet pressed steady rhythms into the dust, each step a note in the silent song of their journey. The air was dry, heavy with the scent of dust and brittle grass, but beneath it, faint and fleeting, drifted the cool promise of water. By midday, the sun pressed heavily overhead. Heat shimmered in the distance, bending the horizon, painting illusions of pools that vanished when approached. Their throats tightened, each swallow dry, but they did not falter. They chewed roots when they could find them, splitting fibres with stones, sucking the faint juice that seeped out. The taste was harsh, woody, but the threads of liquid kept them moving. At last, the land dipped into a basin where reeds grew tall and green. The sound of insects thickened, the air cooled slightly, and there, at the centre, a pond lay waiting. Its surface was still, darkened with mud, but alive with the movements of frogs and dragonflies. Birds flitted quickly along its edges, wings flashing. They waited, as always. Patience was their shield. Antelope clustered, zebras dipped muzzles, warthogs splashed noisily. Only when the rhythm of the animals shifted did they step forward. Kneeling at the edge, they dipped hands, lifted water to cracked lips. The taste was heavy, earthy, touched with plants, but it soothed the rawness in their throats, cooling bellies, loosening muscles tightened by thirst. Nearby, they stripped reeds, chewing soft cores that held faint moisture. Imagine biting into pale celery, drained of flavour, yet still leaving a cool trace. Each chew was small comfort, but comfort nonetheless. The pond was enough for the moment, but the sun claimed it quickly. Its edges pulled inward, mud grew thicker, frogs croaked louder. Knowing the water would not last, they moved onward, guided by instinct and by the herds that shifted ahead. The afternoon stretched long, each step heavy in the heat. Dust clung to skin, sweat slipped slowly down. Yet as dusk arrived, the land softened. Shadows stretched long, air cooled, and the scent of dampness returned. Ahead, they heard it. The quiet trickle of running water. A stream revealed itself winding between rocks, its voice soft and steady. Clearer, cooler than the pond, it slipped over stones, carrying light with it. They drank deeply, filling their bellies, splashing faces, letting the relief sink deep. The taste was crisp, bright, as though it carried the memory of clouds themselves. They gathered fruits from nearby trees, small and tart, staining lips with sour juice. The first bite puckered, sharp, but then sweetness lingered faintly, enough to soften their expressions. They chewed slowly, savouring each piece. As night spread, the stream mirrored the stars, its ripples catching the light like scattered gems. Crickets hummed, frogs answered in low notes, and the air cooled with the breath of evening. Our ancestors rested close, bellies eased, skin cooled, eyes heavy. The stream's voice lulled them, steady as heartbeat, old as the sky. Wrapped in its rhythm, they drifted into dreams, ready for the next day's search. The morning opened with a pale glow, the horizon soft and blurred as though the earth itself was stretching awake. A cool breeze slipped through the grasses, carrying with it the faintest scent of moisture. Our ancestors rose quietly, shaking dust from their skin, their eyes fixed on the wide plain ahead. The stream that had comforted them through the night was now behind, its voice fading, leaving only memory to guide them forward. They followed the paths of animals once again. Tracks pressed deep into soil curved across the land, leading like invisible threads. The heavy round prints of elephants, the lighter scatter of antelope, the sweeping lines of zebra hooves all converged, pointing the way. To walk in those paths was to borrow the wisdom of the herds. As the sun climbed, the land brightened, its grasses painted gold by light. Birds circled above, their wings flashing, their cries sharp. Each sound carried meaning. Where birds gathered thick, water was near. Where silence stretched too long, danger waited. Our ancestors read the sky as carefully as the ground. By midday, the heat pressed down, shimmering across the horizon. Dust clung to the air, filling throats with dryness. Their steps slowed, though patience steadied them. Roots dug from shrubs gave faint relief, bitter and fibrous, moisture hidden deep in the fibres. Each chew was harsh, but each swallow carried life. Then, ahead, a low valley opened. At its centre lay a pond, shallow and still, its edges dark with mud. Reeds leaned toward it, their stalks swaying softly. Frogs clung to its edges, croaking, while dragonflies darted across its surface. The smell of damp soil thickened the air, cooling their senses. They paused, as always, waiting. Herds crowded the edges, zebras pushing in close, antelope drinking in quick turns, warthogs splashing noisily. Even a lioness crouched at the far end, her eyes narrowed, her tail flicking in the dust. Only when the rhythm shifted, when the lioness slipped into tall grass, did they approach. Kneeling at the edge, they cupped water in their hands, lifting it to their mouths. It was warm, touched with mud, yet soothing. Each swallow loosened the tightness in their throats, cooled their bellies, eased the weight of the sun. They stripped reeds too, chewing through fibrous stalks, their soft hearts filled with faint moisture. The taste was faint, but each mouthful was quiet comfort. They stayed until the pond shrank, its edges pulling inward, frogs croaking louder as their refuge disappeared. Knowing the water would not last, they rose and followed the herds again. The land stretched on, shimmering under heat, each step steady, each breath deliberate. By late afternoon the wind shifted. It carried the cool scent of damp stone, the low murmur of something hidden. They pressed forward, and soon a river revealed itself, winding through rocks, its surface glinting with light. The river was wide, its current slow but steady. Elephants stood knee-deep, trunks lifting arcs of silver that sparkled in the sun. Birds swept low, dipping wings. Antelope grazed at its banks, glancing nervously at the shadows of crocodiles drifting just below the surface. Our ancestors approached carefully, watching, listening. When the moment was safe, they knelt, drinking deeply. The water was cooler, fresher than the pond, crisp on the tongue, alive with movement. They splashed faces, washing dust away, their bodies relaxing in the relief. Fruits grew nearby, small and sharp, clinging to branches. They plucked them, biting through skin. The taste was sour, puckering lips, but juicy enough to soothe. They chewed slowly, juice staining their hands, savouring each bite despite its sharpness. As the sun lowered, the river mirrored the sky, glowing orange, then violet, then dark. Stars spread above, scattered across the heavens, mirrored faintly in ripples below. The air cooled, filled with the hum of insects, the croak of frogs, the low calls of distant animals. Our ancestors sat close together, bellies eased, skin cooled, eyes heavy. The river's voice hummed softly, steady as breath. Wrapped in night, they lay back, the sky above and water below guiding them into dreams. The dawn came softly, spreading a pale glow across the wide plain. Grasses shimmered faintly with dew before the sun lifted higher and began to claim them. Our ancestors stirred from their rest near the river, their bodies eased by the night's coolness, their bellies still calm from the water they had taken. But survival was not rest, it was motion. And so, as the sky brightened, they began again. They followed the trails pressed by countless hooves and paws. The land itself carried instructions, written in the language of tracks. Elephant prints wide and deep, zebra hooves pressed close together, antelope steps light and scattered, all led in the same direction. Each trail whispered, "Here lies water, if you're patient enough to reach it." The air was gentle at first, touched with the cool wind, but by mid-morning the sun had risen high, and the plain shifted into brightness. Heat rippled across the ground, bending the horizon. dust stirred with every step, clinging to their throats. They chewed fibrous roots as they walked, splitting them with stones, sucking the faint juice inside. The taste was bitter, but the liquid was precious, a quiet thread of life. Ahead, the land dipped into a shallow hollow. Reeds grew at its edges, their stalks swaying, and in its centre lay a pool. The water was muddy, shallow, its surface dotted with insects. Frogs croaked steadily, dragonflies skimmed the ripples, and birds darted quick as arrows across the surface. Herds had gathered here before them. Zebras pressed close, antelope drank quickly, their ears flicking nervously at every sound. A warthog wallowed noisily in the mud, grunting in satisfaction, and as always danger lingered too. A lioness crouched in the tall grass, her eyes fixed, her body still. Our ancestors paused, waiting. Patience was their shield. Only when the lioness slipped away, melting into the distance, did they step forward. Kneeling, they cupped hands, lifting the muddy water to their lips. The taste was heavy, touched with soil and reeds, but each swallow cooled the dryness in their throats. Relief spread, slow and deep, like shade easing the weight of the sun. They chewed reeds too, tearing fibres apart to reach watery hearts. The crunch was faint, the flavour nearly gone, yet liquid slipped across their tongues, softening their thirst further. It was not joy, but it was survival. The pond shrank under the midday heat, its edges curling inward. Frogs croaked louder as their world grew smaller. Insects darted faster across the surface. Knowing the water would fade, they moved onward, following the paths of herds once more. The afternoon stretched long. Heat shimmered, the air heavy with the hum of insects. Dust clung to their skin, sweat slid slowly down. Yet hope grew with the faint sound of trickling water, carried on the breeze. By late afternoon they found it, a stream winding gently through rocks, its voice soft and steady. The stream was clear, cool, slipping lightly over stones. They knelt eagerly, dipping hands, splashing faces, drinking deeply. The taste was crisp, sweet, alive. Each sip lingered on their tongues, each swallow eased their bodies. They washed dust from their arms, rubbed coolness across their faces, and let out soft sighs of comfort. Nearby, fruits hung heavy on bushes, small, sharp, tart at first bite, but bursting with juice. Their lips puckered at the sourness, but then softened into quiet satisfaction. Juice dripped down their chins, staining hands, and they ate slowly, savouring what nature had given. As the sun lowered, the stream reflected the sky. Orange, then violet, then deep indigo spread across its surface. Frogs croaked from its banks, insects hummed in chorus, and birds called as they settled into silence. Our ancestors sat close, bellies eased, skin cooled, eyes heavy. The stream whispered its lullaby through the night, steady as a heartbeat. Stars spread across the heavens above, mirrored faintly in ripples below. Wrapped in the song of water and the calm of darkness, they drifted once more into dreams. The morning opened with a pale shimmer, the horizon stretching wide beneath a sky washed in soft pink and grey. The stream they had rested beside still murmured faintly behind them, but its song was now memory. Ahead lay the plain, vast and dry, marked by the endless rhythm of survival. Our ancestors rose quietly, their bodies carrying the weight of many such mornings. They stepped onto the faint paths carved by hooves and paws, the ground scattered with prints that overlapped like a story written layer upon layer. Elephant marks pressed deep, antelope steps light and sharp, zebras in steady clusters. To follow these was to trust the wisdom of those who walked before. The air was cool at first, touched by a breeze that smelled faintly of grass. But as the sun climbed, the coolness faded. Heat spread across the land, and the horizon began to shimmer. Dust rose with each step, clinging to their throats, their breaths dry and slow. They chewed roots pulled from shrubs, splitting fibres with stones, sucking the faint liquid hidden inside. The taste was harsh, bitter, but it softened the sharp edge of thirst just enough to carry them onward. By mid-morning, the plain opened into a shallow basin. Reeds grew at its centre, bending green, and there a pond lay waiting. The water was shallow, warm, its surface busy with insects dancing above it. Frogs croaked steadily, dragonflies darted quick as sparks, birds lined the edges, dipping beaks, scattering droplets into the air. Animals had gathered already. Zebras bent their striped necks, tails swishing against flies. Antelope dipped quickly, ears twitching with every sound. Even elephants stood knee-deep, spraying arcs of water across their backs, cooling themselves beneath the rising sun. And in the distance, shadows moved in tall grass. Lions patient, waiting. Our ancestors paused as always. To rush was to risk. They waited, watching the rhythm, until the predators slipped farther away. Then they knelt at the edge. The water was muddy, touched with heat, but it eased their throats, cooled their bellies, softened the dry ache in their chests. Relief spread slowly like cool shade stretching across a hot room. They stripped reeds, chewing stalks until watery hearts released thin threads of moisture. Imagine chewing on celery drained of flavour, pale and soft, yet still leaving cool traces behind. Each chew was quiet comfort. But the pond shrank quickly. The sun drew it inward, edges curling into mud. Frogs croaked louder, birds lifted in restless bursts. Knowing the water would not last, they rose again, following the herds that moved onward. The afternoon was long, heavy with heat. Dust clung to their skin, their bodies tired, yet their patience did not waver. The land itself offered hints, the faint smell of dampness, the whisper of birds gathering, the cooling touch of breeze drifting from unseen hollows. By dusk, their patience was rewarded. A river revealed itself, winding wide, its current slow and steady. Its surface glowed with the light of sunset. Orange, violet, then deepening blue. Animals gathered in calmer rhythm here, spread out along its banks. Crocodiles lingered, their eyes glinting just above the water, but the flow was wide enough to share. Our ancestors drank deeply, kneeling at the edge, letting cool water wash across lips dry from dust. The taste was clean, alive, as though carrying the memory of clouds. They splashed faces, washed skin, let sighs of relief slip from their mouths. Fruits grew along the river's edge, small, tart, juicy. They plucked them, biting into sharp flesh that puckered lips but flooded mouths with moisture. Juice dripped down their chins, sticky and sweet-sour, staining hands faintly. They ate slowly, savouring the gift. As night spread, the river mirrored the sky. Stars spilled across the heavens, their light broken by ripples below. Frogs sang, insects hummed, and the water moved steady, calm. Our ancestors lay close together, their bellies eased, their skin cooled, their eyes heavy. The river's lullaby carried them into dreams, its steady rhythm guiding them softly through the night. The dawn rose slowly, brushing the sky with pale orange and soft blue. The river behind them still whispered faintly, its surface glittering with the last reflections of night, but the path of survival pulled them forward. Our ancestors rose quietly, stretching limbs, their eyes drawn to the wide plain ahead, where grasses bent gently beneath the first touch of wind. They began their walk, following the trails stamped deep into the earth. Elephant prints pressed wide, zebra hooves carved lines, antelope left delicate marks like scattered brush strokes. These were maps written by countless lives, guiding them toward water yet unseen. The air smelled faintly sweet at first, touched with dew, but with each step the sweetness faded into dust. By mid-morning the heat thickened, the horizon wavered painted with mirage. Their throats tightened, each swallow rough, but their patience held. They chewed roots, splitting them with stones, sucking bitter threads of liquid. The taste was woody, harsh, yet each drop spread coolness just enough to keep their bodies moving. At last the silence broke with the chorus of life. Frogs croaked, insects hummed louder, birds gathered in restless flutters. Ahead lay a pond, shallow and ringed with reeds, its surface dotted with dragonflies glinting like shards of glass. Animals had gathered there too. Zebras pressed shoulder to shoulder, antelope lowered their muzzles quickly, warthogs grunted and splashed in the shallows. Our ancestors waited, as they always did. Patience was their shield. They stood in quiet watch until the moment shifted, until the herd spread and danger felt far. Then they knelt, dipping hands into the muddy water, lifting it to their lips. It was warm, heavy with soil, but it eased their throats, cooled their bellies, softened the ache of thirst. They stripped reeds, chewing stalks for their faint moisture. The taste was almost nothing, bland and fibrous, but the liquid hidden within soothed their mouths. Imagine chewing the memory of celery, thin, soft, barely there, yet still carrying a ghost of comfort. The pond shrank quickly beneath the sun. Frogs grew restless, dragonflies darted faster, and the edges pulled inward into mud. Knowing the water would not last, they moved onward, step by step, guided again by signs in the land. The afternoon pressed hard. The sky blazed, heat rippling across the plain. Dust rose with each step, clinging to their skin. Still they followed the tracks, listening for the faint rush of wind through trees, smelling for the cool breath of damp soil. By evening their patience was rewarded. A stream revealed itself, winding narrow but steady through rocks. Its voice was soft, a trickle, a hum like whispered song. They knelt eagerly, splashing faces, drinking deeply. The taste was cool, crisp, bright, as though carrying the memory of distant rains. Relief spread through their bodies, their shoulders loosened, their breath softened. Nearby, fruits grew in clusters, tart and sticky. They plucked them, biting into sharp flesh that puckered lips but flooded mouths with juice. It was sour at first, then faintly sweet, leaving their hands stained and their bellies eased. As the sun sank, the stream reflected its colours, amber, violet, then deepening indigo. Stars emerged above, mirrored faintly in ripples below. Frogs sang from its banks, insects hummed in steady rhythm, and the night spread calm across the land. Our ancestors lay close together, soothed by the stream's lullaby. Thirst was eased, hunger softened, bodies calmed. Wrapped in the song of water and the cool breath of night, they drifted softly into dreams. The morning light crept slowly across the horizon, painting the plain in soft strokes of gold and silver. The stream they had rested beside was now behind them, its song fading into memory. Our ancestors rose quietly, their movements calm, their eyes scanning the vast openness ahead. Every step of their journey was familiar, yet each day carried its own quiet mystery. Where would the water be waiting today? The ground ahead was rougher now, dotted with stones that glimmered faintly in the light. Dust clung to the air, dry and sharp in the throat, yet scattered signs remained. Tracks pressed into soil, grasses bent low, and the faint chatter of birds circling in the distance. Each sign whispered the same message: follow, trust, endure. They chewed roots pulled from shrubs as they walked, splitting the fibres with stone. The taste was bitter, woody, like gnawing on bark. But hidden inside, thin threads of liquid seeped, cooling their mouths just enough to ease the dryness. Imagine chewing something that resisted at first, then softened into quiet relief. It was not joy, but it was survival. By midday, the heat pressed hard. The horizon bent and shimmered, painted with false pools that vanished when approached. Their throats ached, their breaths heavy. Still, their patience never faltered. They knew the land, knew that life left its marks, and soon enough, they heard it. The chorus of frogs, the hum of insects, the soft rush of birds dipping low. Ahead lay a pond, its surface small and shallow, its edges soft with mud. Reeds bent over it like guardians, and dragonflies skimmed its ripples. Zebras pressed close together at the edges, antelope dipped their muzzles nervously, and warthogs grunted as they wallowed noisily in the shallows. Even the faint shadow of a crocodile stirred beneath the surface, reminding all that water carried danger as well as life. Our ancestors waited, their bodies still, their eyes watchful. Only when the herds shifted and the danger slipped farther into silence did they approach. Kneeling, they dipped their hands, lifting water to their lips. It was warm, earthy, touched with mud, but it eased the fire in their throats. They drank slowly, steadily, letting relief spread through them. They pulled reeds too, chewing their cores. The crunch was soft, the taste almost nothing, yet faint streams of liquid slipped across their tongues. Imagine chewing the pale heart of celery left long in the sun, flavourless but still moist. Each mouthful was comfort in disguise. As the sun climbed higher, the pond shrank. Its edges pulled inward, frogs croaked louder, and dragonflies darted faster. Knowing the water would not last, they left before the basin dried further, stepping again into the wide plain. The afternoon stretched long, but the land shifted. The smell of damp soil returned, cool against the sharpness of dust. A slope opened into a valley where rocks split apart, and from their cracks a spring flowed. Its sound was soft, a trickle, steady and patient. They knelt eagerly, splashing faces, drinking deeply. The water was cool, crisp, alive. It slipped across their tongues with sweetness, refreshing in a way ponds could never be. Their shoulders loosened, their breaths steadied. They washed their arms, their faces, letting dust slip away in dark rivulets. Nearby, bushes bore small fruits. They plucked them, biting into tart flesh that puckered lips but flooded their mouths with juice. The sharpness made their eyes narrow, but then a faint sweetness lingered, enough to soften the bite. Juice dripped down their hands, sticky, staining fingers faintly. They ate slowly, savouring the small gift. As evening spread, the spring caught the colours of the sky, orange, violet, indigo, before turning silver under the first stars. The air cooled, carrying the hum of insects, the croak of frogs, the soft sigh of reeds in the breeze. Our ancestors sat close together, their bellies eased, their skin cooled, their eyes heavy. The spring whispered quietly through the night, steady as breath, steady as heartbeat. Wrapped in its gentle song, they drifted into dreams, the world calm for another night. The dawn of a final day rose slowly, spreading soft light across the plain. The sky was brushed with silver and pale gold, the grasses shimmering gently in the first breeze of morning. Our ancestors stirred quietly from their rest near the spring, their eyes still heavy with dreams, their bodies carrying the calm that water had given. Yet the journey never truly ended. Survival was always motion, always listening, always searching. They stepped onto the paths carved by others, the ground marked with countless prints. Elephants had passed here, their steps deep and heavy. Antelope had scattered across the soil in light, quick patterns. Zebras moved in steady clusters, their hooves pressing straight lines forward. These signs pointed the way, each track another note in the land's quiet music. As the sun lifted higher, heat began to gather. Shadows shrank, the horizon bent with shimmer, and the air grew thick with dust. Their throats tightened, their breath grew dry. They chewed roots pulled from the earth, bitter and harsh at first, but softened into faint streams of liquid that cooled their tongues. It was not pleasure, but it was enough to carry them further. By midday, the silence was broken by the chorus of life. Frogs croaked in steady rhythm, insects hummed thick in the air, and birds circled low above the plain. Ahead, reeds bent green, and at their centre lay a pond. Its surface was small, shallow, and dotted with dragonflies that caught the light like glass. Animals gathered there in restless rhythm. Zebras dipped their muzzles quickly, warthogs wallowed in the mud, antelope drank nervously, ears flicking with every sound. Danger lingered in the stillness, shadows moving in the tall grass, predators watching with patient eyes. Our ancestors waited, watching. Only when the rhythm shifted, only when the silence eased did they step forward. Kneeling, they dipped their hands, lifting water to cracked lips. It was warm, earthy, touched with mud, but it cooled their throats, loosened their chests, softened the ache of thirst. Relief spread like shade across a hot field, quiet and deep. They stripped reeds, chewing fibrous stalks until watery cores released faint moisture. The taste was pale, almost nothing, but it carried comfort in its coolness. Imagine chewing the faint ghost of celery, thin, bland, yet still offering a whisper of life. Each bite was a small kindness from the land. By afternoon, the pond shrank, its edges curling inward. Frogs croaked louder, dragonflies darted faster, and the heat pressed down harder. Our ancestors moved onward, their steps steady, their patience guiding them. They followed herds again, trusting the wisdom of animals, trusting the subtle signs carried on the wind. At dusk, their journey reached a river wide and calm, its surface glowing with the light of sunset. Orange spilled into violet, then indigo, reflected in ripples that shimmered like a second sky. Elephants stood at its edge, spraying arcs of water across their backs. Birds darted low, wings brushing the surface. Crocodiles lingered, eyes glinting, but the river was wide enough to share. Our ancestors knelt, drinking deeply. The water was cool, crisp, carrying the taste of stone and sky. Each swallow washed away the dust of the day. Each sip spread comfort through tired bodies. They splashed faces, washed their arms, let the relief sink deep. Nearby, fruits hung heavy. They plucked them, biting into sharp, tart flesh that made their lips pucker. But soon sweet juice spread across their tongues. It was sticky, staining their fingers, but refreshing, alive. They ate slowly, savouring each mouthful. Night spread gently across the land. Stars spilled across the heavens, mirrored in the river below. The air cooled, carrying the hum of crickets, the croak of frogs, the soft sigh of reeds in the breeze. The river's voice sang steadily, soft as breath, old as memory. Our ancestors rested close together, bellies eased, eyes softened. The journey of the day was done. The search would begin again tomorrow, as it always did. But for this night, water was theirs. Wrapped in the song of the river beneath the endless canopy of stars, they drifted into dreams. And so, dear listener, our journey through a world 4.3 million years ago comes to its quiet close. Across plains and ponds, springs and rivers, we have walked with the first seekers, felt the weight of thirst and the calm that water brings. Their search was endless, yet each drop carried peace, each sip carried life. May these memories guide you into restful dreams, carrying you gently as the night deepens. If this calm journey has helped you drift, let me know below, only if it feels right. Sweet dreams, friends. Until next time, whispering softly, good night.